From the moment a glimmer of red caught Karen's eye, Martin Fletcher's fate was sealed. A single email from the HOA promised to crush his pride, targeting not just his vintage Ferrari, but the man behind its wheel. What began as a show of status was about to unravel into humiliation, entitlement, and an unsettling reflection of who truly belongs in this community. In a neighborhood known for its exclusivity, the rules weren't about cars, they were about control. Today, Martin would learn that even luxury can't shield you from being singled out, especially when the system picks its favorite winners and losers. Martin Fletcher had always seen his car as a symbol of hard-earned success. The gleaming 1985 Ferrari wasn't just transportation, it was history, passion, and the promise that effort still means something. He'd moved to Oakmont Estates expecting security, respect, and a sense of community among neighbors who seemed to value the same things. Karen, head of the HOA, was a familiar figure, firm handshake, tightly controlled smile, and the kind of polite cordiality that often felt rehearsed. Oakmont itself was a tapestry of manicured lawns and whispered conversations. Residents took great pride in upholding standards, but sometimes interpretations of those standards were as personal as they were powerful. When Martin first parked his classic Ferrari in his driveway, he noticed an increase in lingering glances and the subtle shift in neighborly greetings. It was as if the car wasn't just flashy, but somehow inappropriate, a beacon inviting judgment and scrutiny. Karen's emails began with compliments on Martin's taste, but her tone quickly changed. By the third message, the concern was clear. Some felt that his flashy car was drawing unwanted attention and disrupting the quiet harmony of Oakmont. For Martin, each email wasn't just an administrative matter. It echoed a deeper exclusion, one laced not only with rigid rules, but with an implicit message. There are ways to belong, and this wasn't one of them. Martin's efforts to address the situation were met with obstacles at every turn. First, he attended an HOA meeting hoping for an open discussion. Instead, he found himself surrounded by uneasy silence, as neighbors and board members avoided direct eye contact. When Karen outlined the flashiness violation, her voice was steady, but her words seemed loaded with meaning. No official policy mentioned flashiness, yet the board quickly voted in favor of a steep fine, one designed not just to punish, but publicly shame. Word spread throughout the neighborhood. Martin's driveway became the subject of whispered gossip and pointed looks, making it painfully clear that this issue was not about cars and not about rules. It was about the invisible boundaries drawn by an insular group intent on enforcing conformity. As the days passed, the weight of the fine was far less than the sting of humiliation. Oakmont Estates, a place built on privilege, demonstrated just how exclusion, even among equals, could be justified under the guise of protecting tradition. For Karen, power meant upholding the collective, even if the collective was wielded as a weapon. Martin's attempts to appeal the decision were futile. Repetitive paperwork, delayed responses, and sudden changes to meeting times ensured his voice stayed unheard. Each setback brought a new wave of frustration and loneliness, as the system designed for transparency was used to shield those in charge from accountability. Stories of other neighbors facing similar treatment surfaced, revealing a long-standing pattern of arbitrary enforcement targeting anyone perceived as different. In Oakmont Estates, discrimination wasn't explicit, but its consequences were all too real. The Ferrari, once a source of pride, now stood as a symbol of resistance and punishment. The injustice Martin faced resonated with anyone who had been singled out for failing to meet unspoken expectations, especially when those expectations built walls instead of bridges. For days, Martin debated selling the car, withdrawing further into his home, and letting the experience change him. But something held him back, a growing realization that the true problem went far deeper than a simple fine. It was about who gets silenced, who gets shamed, and how the rules never seem to apply equally to all. All Martin's hope for resolution evaporated during the HOA's final review. Karen led the meeting with an air of authority, dismissing his concerns with cold efficiency. The board reaffirmed the punishment, choosing speed over fairness and process over empathy. In Martin's mind, each board member's expression was a silent confirmation that belonging was conditional, a privilege, not a right, As the session ended, Karen delivered the verdict. The fine was non-negotiable, and Martin's car would need to be parked out of sight or face additional penalties. The official reason cited a recently drafted Community Harmony Clause, a rule conveniently added after Martin's first complaint. Martin realized this wasn't just about him. Oakmont's rules were shifting to target dissent, to reinforce lines in the sand invisible to those empowered to draw them. Outside, Martin stood before his car, surrounded by Oakmont's celebrated quiet. It was in this moment, stripped of dignity and voice, that the injustice crystallized. Even among those who claim acceptance and equality, exclusion festers beneath the surface, ready to justify itself as security, order, or harmony. The humiliation that Martin endured didn't come from a stranger. It was delivered by a system designed by neighbors, managed by friends, and enforced with bureaucratic precision. Karen's actions weren't about protecting Oakmont. They were about protecting her vision of who fit and who didn't. The fine wasn't the end of Martin's story. It was the clearest proof that privilege allows the gatekeepers to define not just the rules, but the lived experience of everyone outside those gates. Martin chose not to accept the outcome quietly. Instead, he documented his experience and shared it with local journalists and online forums, hoping to spark a conversation about the quieter forms of discrimination that thrive in respectable spaces. His story struck a nerve, drawing support from others who had faced similar invisible walls in their own communities. Messages poured in, offering solidarity and exposing an undercurrent of exclusion that stretches far beyond Oakmont Estates. Karen, used to wielding power without consequence, found her reputation challenged as the story gained attention. For the first time, residents questioned the purpose and fairness of HOA rules, recognizing that shame and humiliation have no place in a community built on mutual respect. Martin's courage forced a reckoning, one that didn't change policies overnight, but made it impossible to ignore the ways that privilege and exclusion can masquerade as tradition. This experience left Martin changed, but not broken. The humiliation he once felt was replaced with resolve to confront injustice, no matter how refined or well hidden. Oakmont Estates was just one neighborhood, yet its story mirrored countless others where privilege is the real gatekeeper and injustice flourishes in plain sight when rules are left unquestioned. The story ends with a piercing question for every viewer. How many communities remain divided, not by fences, but by the silent consensus of those in power? When exclusion is justified as harmony, who benefits and who is forced to pay the price? Martin's journey is a reminder to challenge silence, confront injustice, and demand better, even when the fight starts at your own front door.